Hi folks, T's Daily. I'm back with you again. Thanks for joining me. Today's the next video. We're going to have a look at the variable slope VCF as part of the Serge lineup from random source. And this is the Euro-Rack format, obviously. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what makes this a great filter, different to the variable Q VCF, and I'll show you some audio demos and hopefully unpack what this thing's capable of. So I guess comparing it to the variable QVCF, it's got a different kind of sound to it, really. There's a lot of similarities, but it's got some different features and functions that make it, pretty unique, and definitely worth having alongside the VCF Q. So let's just get into it. So you can see along the top we have our outputs. There's only three different bands of outputs in this case. So we have the high pass, band pass, and low pass respectively there, as you can see. The middle section underneath this here is our input section for our input signals. So there's two inputs. Typically I guess you would use audio, but you can definitely try filtering to control voltage as well. But we have this potentiometer in the middle that allows us to crossfade between the two inputs. So that's pretty handy and useful for, you can use it for mixing, the two inputs. You can use it for attenuating. For instance, you can have a single input and use the balance control to attenuate the input. It's also handy to have two input signals and, for applications of feedback patching and, sort of those kinds of things. So underneath this we have our main sort of controls for the filter, and on the left side you can see we have this slope parameter at the bottom and respective voltage control input and attenuverter for the slope parameter, and that's really what makes, it's one of the key aspects of this filter that make it unique, is this control over the slope or the steepness of the filter, or the cutoff, and the way it attenuates the frequencies around the cutoff. So it's unique to this filter. There's not a great many filters around that have this control and have voltage control over this as well. So this is what really makes this a distinctive and unique kind of filter. In the center we have this Q parameter, which is a nice addition from random source. This particular version, I know older editions of the VCFS didn't have the Q parameter at all. The only control you sort of had with regards to the resonance was through the slope parameter. So it's a nice addition thanks to random source. And finally we have the frequency cutoff parameter on the bottom right, and respective voltage control and attenuverter inputs or controls. We have a volt per octave input for control over the cutoff. So this is useful for key tracking, and it can be useful just for a second modulation input as well. But it's ideally tracking 1 volt per octave. It's useful for getting the filter to track across the key range and so on. So I guess a few notable things about this filter that I will bring up is the fact that it does sounds really good, but it's quite temperamental, well, not temperamental, but pretty sensitive as far as the input levels and the signals go. So you want to bear that in mind, and just remember that the Serge modules tend to work in the voltage range of minus 2.5 through to positive 2.5, the voltage swing of 5 volts. So you might find other Euro-Rack oscillators if you've got Euro-Rack obviously, but other oscillators that may operate in a different range and overdrive the input stages of the filter, maybe worth attenuating your signals if you're dealing with other oscillators, because it does clip quite easily, and you can get some pretty nasty distortion if you're not careful. So just bear that in mind. Another key sort of quality, I guess, of the filter is that it doesn't self-oscillate straight up without some self-patching, which I'll get to. But yeah, even with the with no inputs and the resonance control at max and the steepness of the slope at the max, we turn the level up on the mixer, you're still not going to hear anything. It doesn't self-oscillate like a lot of other analog filters will. So I'll show you how you can get around that if you're after that kind of behavior in a moment, but I'll just talk about what I've got patched up here. So at the moment I have a sawtooth from our NTO here on the left going to input 1, and I have a white noise source coming from a Turing machine to input 2, and the mix level's set somewhere in the middle. So if we turn this up, should be able to hear this. So I'm going to back the resonance and the slope back all the way counterclockwise and increase the frequency on the cutoff, opening the filter up. So we're coming from the low pass output at the moment. You can hear that mix of white noise on the sawtooth, and you can see that on the spectrum. I'll just blow that up just so we can get a better idea. So you can see those higher harmonics and overtones coming into the signal as we open that up, and as we close it with a diminish, as you would expect. So I'll turn the resonance up, and you can get a bit of an idea on how much more bite that will give the filter. So you can hear that's a little bit more bitey, and as we increase the slope parameter, increase the steepness of the filter, get even more bite again. It just gets even more aggressive and resonant. You can see that bump on the spectrum around the cutoff frequency. And you might have noticed there, you get it about there at this frequency. What's happening is that this filter tends to peak out a bit when you get the cutoff frequency and the input frequency matching. You will notice a bit of a bump at the level of the output, and yeah, if you're not careful you can run into some distortion and so on. But yeah, it's pretty well known. I've read about different builds using different types of components to sort of compensate for the the tolerances of the input signals and the just that particular bump in the cutoff and that behavior. But it just sounds great. Like it still sounds just, it's a really marvelous sounding filter. With the slope all the way counterclockwise, I think we're operating with a 6 dB or minus 6 dB slope, so that's quite useful for applications if you're looking to use it as a low pass gate, for instance. So if you modulate the cutoff and fed it through a VCA with the same modulation, you'll get a really nice kind of low pass gate effect, which I'm just going to demonstrate now. Just quickly, I'll just patch this up, and you can hear. I'll just raise that cutoff somewhat because it's no, actually the CV is inverted, so make sure that's. So there you go. It's a bit slow, but you can hear that effectively working like a low pass gate, and the fact that the filter, you know, closes almost to the point where you fully cut the signal off. It's really effective. So you can do some really cool sort of booklet bongo type sounds, and you know, other types of low pass gate sounds, you know, that way. As you increase the steepness of the slope of the cutoff, open that filter up a bit. Works from, pretty sure it works from minus 6 dB through to about minus 18 dB when it's maxed out at, you know, fully clockwise. You can hear that. Definitely has more bite. And then once you increase that Q, the resonance, it's like I was saying, it gets really bitey, but doesn't self-oscillate. So you can really pinch the harmonics out of the sound and signal. I'll mix that all the way to our sawtooth signal. Sorry, my cutoff frequency pot is a bit scratchy. You know, getting supplies to do the repair at the moment is a bit of a challenge with all the COVID stuff going on. But so I was a little hesitant to make the video with covering this module because of that, but nonetheless, get the idea. So let's take a listen to the bandpass output. So we'll take the resonance and the slope all the way down, so it doesn't fully close at high frequencies, but you can still get quite a nice range, and doesn't quite close at the low end either. And if we increase the steepness of the slope, again, just gives it more bite. It really pulls the harmonics out. Finally, the high pass. So once again, I'll back those resonance and slope controls off, and so all the way up, and almost closes, but not quite. You can still hear some real quite high harmonics sneaking through. And bring some of that noise back in. Increase the steepness and the resonance. So it can get pretty interesting when you start modulating cutoff and the slope as well, so like we were doing before. I've got to modulate the slope with another modulation source. Take that cutoff modulation off so we can just hear the slope. So it's pretty subtle, but when you increase the resonance it becomes a little more prominent. So we'll add some modulation to the cutoff. So when you combine them at different rates you get some pretty interesting effects as far as the modulation goes. Now the band pass. If we increase these into the audio range, I'll try the low pass first, but bring some noise back in. Yeah, so you get the idea there. So it gets pretty interesting when you start using audio rate modulation. We'll just use a sine wave from our other NTO. This is coming to the cutoff. So you get some really nice rich formity timbres when you start using audio rate modulations. You hear those kind of formity qualities coming out. audio rate of the slope can be pretty interesting as well. So let's take a just grab a cable that's long enough. We'll come from the. I'll take another sine wave from our third oscillator. Again, we start to get some really kind of interesting movement and textures. Increase the resonance. We'll try the bandpass output. We'll try the high pass. So. As you can hear, there's a world of interesting sounds you can coax out of it. I guess I'll show you one last trick to just demonstrate how you can make this filter self-oscillate. It is possible, it's just not obvious. Just like a lot of the functions with Serge modules. So, like I was saying earlier, you can't hear this straight up with the resonance at max, no input here, so there's no self-oscillation. So in order to do that, we need to take the output, we'll take the bandpass, and it needs to be inverted in this case, because obviously the filter's doing some phase shifting of the inputs to what it's putting at the output. So once you invert that signal, you can bring it back to the input. Now, just be careful, because this tends to be pretty hot at the output, so you can get some pretty hot signals. As you can see, I'm not bringing that mixer up much. I'll take that audio modulation off the slope. Maybe I'll put it back in a moment, but you can hear now we have self-oscillation. So you can use the mix level to get the right amount of feedback, and you don't really need the resonance up to a higher level in this case either. Oh, that's a motorbike. Sorry. Yeah, so it's got quite a high range. Like, it can get up pretty high, as you can see. once again, combining that with audio rate modulation can get pretty cool sounds like FM. That was the cut off. Now we'll modulate the slope at audio rate. It's almost like some sync kind of effect happening there. It locks onto the... So some really interesting sounds again. Definitely worth exploring. So I guess that just about wraps it up as far as what I want to cover. I think it, it's a, like I was saying, I think it's a bit more straightforward compared to other Serge modules in that it's just some patch programmability there, but it's much more straightforward and I guess, well, vanilla for want of a better word. It does a great job as a filter. Like, it's a really great sounding filter, and yeah, it's definitely worth having. So I'm going to leave it there. If you've got comments, questions and criticisms, any of that stuff, feel free to drop us a line. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Yeah, see ya.